Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're diving into a topic that's really fascinating and important. We're going to be looking at the experiences of gay, lesbian, and transgender Muslims. And we'll be using this book, Living Out Islam, Voices of Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Muslims, as our main source material.
Wow.
I'm so excited to really delve into these personal accounts. And it's about understanding the complexities of reconciling sexual and gender identity with faith and tradition. And, we have an incredible expert joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Someone who really understands Islamic studies and social dynamics.
Well, I appreciate that. And, I think it's crucial to acknowledge right from the start that the experiences of LGBTQ Muslims are not monolithic.
Right.
This book highlights 4 contexts that shape their journeys: personal conscience, religious tradition, family and community expectations, and the influence of their nation.
Wow, that's such a great point, because it's not just about interpreting religious texts in isolation.
Yeah, exactly.
But how these interpretations play out in the real world. And the book really brings that tension to life, doesn't it?
It does. And it shows how much individuals really wrestle with their personal convictions and what they understand to be Islamic teachings.
There's this one concept that I kept coming across as I was reading.
Okay.
And I'd love for you to kind of unpack it for us a bit. The concept of ijtihad. Can you explain what that means and how it applies to understanding homosexuality in Islam?
So ijtihad, if we break it down, it's essentially that intellectual effort to interpret Islamic teachings. It's about engaging with the Quran and Hadith, not just blindly accepting things, but really using critical thinking. And this has major implications for how we approach the topic of homosexuality.
Makes sense.
Some scholars argue that verses related to the Prophet law, which are often cited to condemn homosexuality, are actually misinterpreted or taken out of context.
Okay.
And some even challenge the authenticity of certain hadith that are used to condemn homosexuality.
So it's not about rejecting Islamic teachings altogether.
No, not at all.
But more about engaging with them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
And it sounds like some scholars are using ijtihad to advocate for a more inclusive and compassionate understanding of Islam.
Exactly. They're saying, look, we need to look at this with fresh eyes. We need to consider the historical context. We need to challenge our assumptions.
The book has this really fascinating example of Muhsin, a gay Muslim man living in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
And he actually uses Quranic verses to advocate for tolerance and understanding.
That's incredible.
It's not just about cherry picking.
Yeah.
Verses that support his viewpoint. He's presenting this really well thought out argument.
I'd love to hear more about that.
So can you give us an example of his approach? Like, what specific verses does he use, and how does he connect them to LGBTQ acceptance?
So Muhsin really focuses on verses that emphasize compassion, justice, and protecting the vulnerable. He argues that these are core Islamic principles that should apply to all individuals, regardless of their sexual orientation. He believes these verses highlight the importance of understanding and accepting diversity within the Muslim community.
So he's kind of reframing the conversation. Instead of focusing on the verses often used to condemn homosexuality, he's emphasizing the Quran's message of inclusivity.
Yeah.
It's like how much this debate really hinges on interpretation.
Interpretation is absolutely crucial. And another powerful example that we see in the book is Dai, an African-American Muslim man. He draws this really interesting parallel between the acceptance of interracial marriage and the potential for accepting same-sex relationships within Islam.
Wow, that's a really strong analogy.
He points out, that interracial marriage was once condemned based on interpretations of scripture, but now it's widely accepted. He sees this as a potential roadmap for evolving views on same-sex relationships.
It really highlights how interpretations can shift over time.
They do.
And it makes me think about the term fahisha, which translates to immorality. And it's often used by some scholars to condemn homosexuality. Could you talk a bit about the different interpretations of this term?
Yeah, fahisha is one of those terms that has sparked a lot of debate. Some scholars argue that its application to homosexuality is a misinterpretation, while others interpret it more broadly. But it's important to remember that fahisha has historically been used to marginalize various groups. We see this pattern repeating itself with different interpretations over time.
It's like even a single word can be so loaded with cultural and historical baggage.
It can.
Leading to very different interpretations.
Yeah.
I think this underscores the need to really go beyond those surface level understandings.
Yes, absolutely.
And recognize the nuances of these conversations.
And I think that's a perfect segue to our next point, because navigating religious texts is only one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
The book also sheds light on the challenges that LGBTQ Muslims face when it comes to family and community.
Absolutely. I mean, that fear of bringing shame upon their family is a recurring theme.
It is.
Throughout the book. And the book shares this really touching story of Nargis, a lesbian Muslim woman in South Africa who actually found acceptance from her mother.
That's wonderful.
It's a really heartwarming story.
It is.
But I have a feeling it's probably not the norm.
You're right.
Is it?
Nargis's experience offers a glimmer of hope and shows that acceptance within families is possible. But sadly, it's not representative of most experiences. The book explores this further with Tamsila, a lesbian Muslim woman in the UK who founded the Safra Project, which is an organization specifically for LGBTQ Muslims. She faced a lot of challenges within her own family, which ultimately led her to create a space for support and acceptance outside of her immediate family.
So while Nargis's story is encouraging, Tamsila's experience really highlights the need for spaces, like the Safra Project.
Exactly.
It seems like LGBTQ Muslims often have to seek support outside of their families.
Yes, and we see that with Dai as well. You know, he struggled for acceptance even from his teachers at an Islamic institute in the U.S.
Oh, wow. So even within those spaces, there should be, you know, supportive and understanding. There can be that rejection and judgment.
Yeah.
It makes you think about LGBTQ Muslims living in secular democracies, like the Netherlands.
Yeah.
How do we navigate this complex intersection of faith, culture, and individual rights?
That's a great question. And the book takes us to the Netherlands to explore that very issue. And as we'll see, it's not always a simple path. Even in societies that pride themselves on tolerance, there are still layers of complexity to unravel.
I'm really curious to hear more about that. So you'd think a country like the Netherlands, known for its progressive values, would be a haven for LGBTQ Muslims. But the book paints a more nuanced picture, doesn't it?
It definitely does. The Netherlands, while striving for inclusivity, you know, it's not without its challenges. The book really highlights this tension between integrating into Dutch society and maintaining a strong Muslim identity. It's like this balancing act that many LGBTQ Muslims in the Netherlands are constantly grappling with.
It's so interesting how even in a place that's considered, you know, so progressive, these challenges still exist. The book introduces us to Omar, a gay Muslim man who founded the Yosef Foundation in the Netherlands. Can you tell us more about his work and how he's addressing this tension?
So the Yosef Foundation is all about promoting dialogue and understanding between the Muslim community and Dutch society at large, especially around LGBTQ issues. Omar's really trying to bridge that gap, you know, to foster communication and break down stereotypes.
That's incredible. I remember reading about the El Mumni affair, where an imam made those really inflammatory homophobic statements. What was Omar's response to that incident?
Yeah, that was a really challenging situation. But instead of pursuing legal action, which, you know, could have just fueled the fire and deepened the divide, Omar chose dialogue. He really felt that suing the imam would be counterproductive.
So he really took the higher road there, trying to turn a negative situation into an opportunity for growth.
Exactly. He saw it as a chance to educate and foster understanding both within the Muslim community and broader Dutch society.
That's such a powerful example of choosing understanding over confrontation. The book also introduces us to Rashid, another gay Muslim man in the Netherlands, and he seems to have a slightly different perspective.
Yes, Rashid advocates for this really nuanced understanding of homosexuality within Islam, and he's actually quite critical of the secular approach to LGBTQ emancipation that's often promoted in the Netherlands. He argues that this approach often ignores the cultural and religious context of many Muslim communities.
So he's kind of pushing back against just blindly adopting a Western framework for LGBTQ rights.
Exactly. He sees his identity as a Muslim and as a Moroccan as integral to who he is, and he doesn't want to have to compartmentalize those aspects of himself. He wants to be accepted as a whole person.
It raises this really important question. Can someone be both a devout Muslim and proudly LGBTQ? And it seems like so many individuals in the book are wrestling with this very question.
They are, and that's where the importance of support systems really comes in. The book highlights a number of organizations like Al-Fatiha Foundation, Iman, the Safra Project, which offer these safe spaces for LGBTQ Muslims to connect and share their experiences.
It's about finding that community, isn't it? a place where you can be your authentic self.
Absolutely. And it's not just about finding support within the Muslim community. There's also this growing emphasis on interfaith dialogue and collaboration with progressive individuals and organizations from other religious backgrounds.
It's recognizing that this is a shared struggle, right? That the fight for LGBTQ rights transcends any one faith or community.
Exactly. Faisal, a gay Muslim man featured in the book, really articulates this beautifully. He sees this common ground between progressive Muslims, feminists, LGBTQ advocates, and he really emphasizes the power of collective action to create a more just world.
So far, we've mainly focused on the experiences of gay and lesbian Muslims. What about transgender Muslims? How does the book address their specific challenges?
The book does a great job of bringing those voices to the forefront. It challenges the traditional binary understanding of male and female and highlights this concept of gender as a spectrum.
It's about recognizing that gender isn't just black and white, isn't it? There's this whole spectrum of identities and expressions.
Precisely. And it's important to note that gender variance isn't a new concept in Islamic societies. Historically, you have terms like mukanath, which refers to effeminate men, and hijra, a third gender in South Asia. These terms demonstrate this long-standing recognition of gender diversity within these cultures.
So it's not just a modern Western concept, it's something that's been present in these cultures for centuries.
Yeah, and the book really encourages us to move beyond those oversimplified narratives and embrace the full spectrum of experiences within the Muslim community.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, Aziz's story really stayed with me. He's the gay Muslim therapist from South Africa who went on the Hajj pilgrimage with his partner.
Oh, yeah. Aziz's story is incredible.
What was it about his experience that stood out to you?
Well, you have to remember the Hajj is one of the 5 pillars of Islam. It's this incredibly significant spiritual journey for Muslims and for Aziz to undertake that journey with his partner.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about his commitment to both his faith and his identity.
It really does. It's a testament to living authentically. But I also remember reading that even after experiencing that sense of acceptance and belonging during the Hajj, he later encountered hypocrisy from the very same religious leader who had guided their group.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate reality. It highlights this real tension within the Muslim community. There's often a disconnect between the ideals of acceptance and the actual discrimination that many LGBTQ Muslims face.
It's disheartening, but it also underscores the need for continued dialogue and education.
Absolutely.
So what do you think are some of the most important steps we can take to create a more inclusive and welcoming environment for LGBTQ Muslims?
Well, open and honest dialogue is crucial. We need to create those safe spaces where these difficult conversations can happen without fear of judgment or reprisal.
Right, those spaces where people can truly be themselves.
Exactly. And the book really emphasizes this need to challenge those in positions of religious authority. You know, they need to truly embody the spirit of Islam, which is compassion, justice, understanding for all.
It's about putting those values into action. What about education? What role do you think education plays in this process?
Education is absolutely essential. We need to dispel those harmful stereotypes and misconceptions about LGBTQ people and their experiences. You know, it's about fostering empathy and understanding both within the Muslim community and in broader society.
I think the book also does a great job of highlighting the interconnectedness of various social justice movements.
Yeah, it shows us that this is not an isolated issue. The fight for LGBTQ rights is intertwined with other struggles for social justice, whether it's feminism, racial equality, economic justice. You know, they're all connected.
It's like Faisal said, collective action is essential for creating a more just and equitable world for everyone.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into this incredibly important topic, what would you say are the most essential takeaways for our listeners?
I think it's crucial to remember the sheer diversity of experiences within the Islamic community when we're talking about gender and sexuality. We can't make sweeping generalizations or rely on stereotypes. Each individual's journey is unique, and we need to approach these conversations with sensitivity and respect.
It's about recognizing the individual humanity in each of these stories.
Exactly. And this deep dive has really only scratched the surface. I'd encourage everyone to explore Living Out Islam, Voices of Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Muslims, for a more in-depth look at these lived experiences. It's a powerful and thought-provoking book that challenges us to think critically about faith identity and acceptance.
I couldn't agree more. And it reminds us that the journey toward a more inclusive and compassionate world is ongoing, and we all have a role to play. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and insights with us today.
It was my pleasure. These are important conversations to have.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. We hope this episode has encouraged you to learn more, engage in these important conversations, and continue the pursuit of understanding and empathy.